I've lived in this house for almost half a century. I know every crack in the ceiling, every creak in the floorboards. Marjorie and I bought it new right after we got married. We took out a 25-year mortgage and paid it off in full 2 years early. I remember we had a little party. We opened a bottle of cheap champagne and danced in the living room to the music on the old radio. It seemed to me then that we had a lifetime ahead of us, that Marjorie and I would grow old together in these walls, nursing grandchildren and warming our old bones by the fireplace on long winter evenings. But fate had it differently. Marjorie passed away 5 years ago. Lung cancer. The doctors said we had another year, maybe a year and a half. In the end, she burned to death in 3 months. I can still see her eyes in her last days. There was such weariness in them, and such gratitude for every minute I spent by her side, holding her hand. She didn't want to die in the hospital, so I took her home. "Garth," she said to me one night when she couldn't sleep from the pain, "promise me that you won't live in the past, that you'll find the strength to move on." I promised. But how do you keep that promise when every corner of the house reminds you of her? When the habit of saying "we" instead of "I" has become so ingrained in my speech that even the clerk at the store next door corrects me. "Mr. Beckwith, you mean you need bread, not both of you." The first year after the funeral was the hardest. I hardly ever left the house, looking at old photo albums and drinking tea from Marjorie's mug, the one with the peeling paint and the wildflower pattern. Neighbors dropped in occasionally, bringing food, urging him to go out. My son Lloyd called once a week to ask how I was holding up, but his visits were infrequent. Work, family, always busy. And then something happened that eventually led me to today. Lloyd called one evening, his voice sounding strained. He and Janice had lost their apartment some story with the bank, late payments, and eviction. I didn't understand the details, but the point was clear. They needed a place to live. "Dad, it won't be for long," Lloyd assured me. 6 months tops, until we get back on our feet and find something suitable. How could I say no to my own son? There were 3 bedrooms in the house, and I only occupied one. The rest of the space seemed empty, droning, filled with ghosts of the past. Maybe, I thought, the presence of a young family would breathe life into these walls. Maybe this was the chance to move on that Marjorie had spoken of. They arrived 2 days later, Lloyd, Janice, and 4 huge suitcases, plus boxes, which were then picked up by a delivery van for another week. For people who had lost their homes due to financial problems, they had a surprising amount of stuff. "I hope you don't mind us setting up the rooms a little," Janice said as she unpacked another box of knickknacks. "Lloyd said you didn't mind the change." I mumbled something in response. Of course I didn't mind. After all, they lived here now too, albeit temporarily. The first changes were almost imperceptible. My pictures of me and Marjorie moved from the mantelpiece to the bookstand in the corner. Lloyd and Janice's wedding pictures took their place. Then the old vase that my wife and I had bought in Cornwall during our only vacation together by the sea disappeared. In its place on the hall table was now a modern glass structure of some kind. "We had to get rid of a few of your things, Dad," Lloyd said when I asked where the table lamp from the living room had gone. "They didn't fit in at all with the new decor, but don't worry, we put them in the garage. You can always get them if you want them." I nodded. Things are just things. How could I upset my relationship with my family over them? But it wasn't just things. Gradually, the whole way of life at home was changing. I used to get up at 6 in the morning, make breakfast, and read the paper in the kitchen. Now Janice was in the kitchen from 7 to 9, making elaborate smoothies and breakfast for herself and Lloyd. She was constantly on the phone, talking to her friends about her problems at work, the latest TV series, or weekend plans. My presence clearly interfered with these intimate conversations. She stopped talking when I entered and glanced at her watch. "Don't you think Daddy spends too much time in the kitchen?" I overheard her talking to Lloyd one day. "I can't watch what I say all the time. and his habit of shuffling his slippers. I started eating breakfast in my room. Lloyd bought me a little electric kettle to make it easier for you, Dad. The evenings changed, too. I used to watch the 8 o'clock news, sometimes a detective story or documentary. Now the living room was dominated by the reality shows and soap operas that Lloyd and Janice loved. They cranked up the sound of the TV so loud it rattled the glass in the sideboard. "Dad, if it bothers you, you can go to your room," Lloyd said when I tried to hint that the volume was too high. "You have your own little TV in your bedroom." Yeah, I had a TV, an old one with a 15-inch screen that used to be in the kitchen. Lloyd had moved it into my room when they got their new, huge, full-wall TV in the living room. I began to go for long walks more and more often. The weather was fine in Birmingham, and Highbury Park was only 15 minutes' walk away. There were benches, a pond with ducks, and a few old men like me with whom I could have a word or two about the weather, politics, or how young people aren't what they used to be. Sometimes I took a book with me and sat there until the evening, returning home only for dinner. But dinners were no longer what they used to be. In the first few weeks, we still sat down together at the table, and I tried to cook something for all of us. But Janice quickly made it clear that my cooking skills didn't impress her. "Garth, no offense, but how many of these post-war meals of yours can we eat?" she said after I'd made cabbage stew and meat. "People eat differently in the 21st century, don't they, darling?" Lloyd smiled embarrassedly and waved his hand, saying, "What can you do?" Now they ate separately, often ordering food delivered. Sometimes Janice cooked something herself, complicated dishes with exotic names and ingredients I couldn't even pronounce. They invited me to join them less and less often, and when I did sit down with them, the conversation usually didn't go well. And then Emma tells the marketing guy that if he tries to take credit for her ideas again, she'll make such a scene that his career will be over before he can say corporate ethics. Janice laughed as she told another office story. Lloyd kept her laughing, and I sat there staring at my plate, not understanding what was so funny. "What do you think, Garth?" Janice suddenly asked. I looked up, surprised at the sudden attention. "About what?" "About what Emma's going to do with that asshole," Janice rolled her eyes. "Are you even listening?" "Honey, Daddy must be tired," Lloyd interjected. "He's got his own worries, and not everyone is interested in office squabbles." "What kind of worries could he have?" Janice snorted, but then she realized and smiled strainedly. "I mean, retirement is so peaceful, isn't it, Garth? No deadlines, no meetings." I nodded and didn't say anything. What could I say? That my main concern was trying not to feel like a stranger in my own home, that I'm afraid to go down to the kitchen at night for a glass of water so I don't disturb them with my shuffling. After these dinners, I used to go to my room, turn on my little television and stare at the screen, not knowing what was on. Thinking about Marjorie, about our life, about how I'd gotten myself into this situation. Maybe it was my own fault. Too soft, too compliant. Marjorie always said I didn't know how to stand up for myself. "Garth," she kept saying, "people will treat you the way you let them. But how do you not defer to your own son? How do you demand respect when it looks like the old man is being capricious?" Things got tricky with money, too. At first, Lloyd and Janice insisted they would pay for utilities and groceries. But after a couple months, they found out they were having temporary difficulties. "Dad, you realize we need to get back on our feet," Lloyd said. "Every pound counts now. And you have a stable pension. You don't need much." So I agreed. After all, what am I going to do with the money? I don't travel. I don't go to restaurants. I don't buy new clothes. My pension isn't the smallest. I've earned the right to a decent paycheck in 35 years at the plant. I have enough for bills and food, and even a little left over for books and the occasional pint of beer at the Red Lion pub on the corner. But it turned out that my pension wasn't just for bills and food. One day I discovered that Lloyd had withdrawn money from my card without asking permission. Sorry, Dad. It was an emergency, he explained. Janice's car broke down and needed to be repaired right away. I was going to tell you, but I forgot. We'll pay it back next month, I promise. They didn't. Not next month, not in 2 months. And then there were new emergencies. The laptop broke, or they needed money for some important business course for Janice, or something else. Garth, don't be so petty, Janice said when I dared to remind her of my debt. We're family. Does family count as money? And the next day I watched her unload bags of purchases from expensive stores from her car. Sometimes, in particularly difficult moments, I would pull out a picture of Marjorie, the one of her laughing by our old apple tree in the orchard, and talk to her. What would you do if you were me, Marge? I asked. How would you have handled it? Marjorie was always stronger than me, more determined. She would never let herself be cornered. This is our home, Garth, she would say. We've worked our whole lives to get it. No one has the right to take it from us. But Marjorie isn't here. And here I am, 1 against 2, and every day I feel more and more superfluous within my own walls. We're having guests over tonight, Dad, Lloyd said one day. My co-workers from work. It's going to be a little noisy, I hope you don't mind. I didn't mind. I was glad. Maybe there'd finally be some excitement in the house, some new faces, some conversation. I could make something for tea, I suggested. I'm good at your mom's apple pie. Lloyd and Janice looked at each other. Thanks, Dad, but we're already organized, Lloyd replied. And, maybe you should spend the evening at your place. The guys will talk about work and you won't be interested. I get it. I didn't want to be at this meeting. Old man talk, old man habits, it didn't fit into their idea of a cool party. Sure, I said. I didn't mean to intrude. I just thought I'd help with the refreshments. Don't worry about it, Janice smiled her fake smile. We ordered catering from the Green Parrot. You know, those fancy appetizers, canapes, tapas. No, I didn't know. I wasn't even sure I'd heard the names right. Just another reminder of how out of place I am in their lives. In the evening, I sat in my room listening to music and laughter from downstairs. Occasionally, scraps of conversation would reach me. Something about promotions, about traveling, about new cars. A world I had never been a part of and would no longer be a part of. At one point, the door to my room opened without knocking. Standing on the threshold was an unfamiliar middle-aged man with a glass of wine in his hand. Oops, sorry, he said. I was looking for the bathroom. Second door on the right down the hall, I replied. The man didn't leave, eyeing me curiously. You must be Lloyd's father, he asked at last. He said you were living with them. Technically, they live with me, I corrected. This is my house. Oh, yeah, sure, the man nodded. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that Lloyd always says, our house, so I thought. He stopped, apparently realizing he'd said too much. It's all right, I said. I understand. The man shuffled from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable. Well, I'm going to go find that bathroom, he finally said, and closed the door. I sat looking at the closed door and thought about the stranger's words. Lloyd always says our house. When exactly did that happen? When did my house become their house? When did I go from host to guest, from father to burden? Maybe the day I let them rearrange the pictures on the mantelpiece? Or when I agreed that my food was too old-fashioned? Or when I remained silent when I saw my map lying in the wrong place? 1,000 little concessions, 1,000 swallowed resentments. And here I sit locked in my own room while strangers party in my house, not even realizing that the real host is me, and not the couple pouring expensive wine into my glasses. People will treat you the way you let them, I heard Marjorie's voice again. And for the first time in a long time, I thought, what if she's right? What if it wasn't too late to change things? The calendar on the wall showed March 21st, Janice's birthday. I found out about it by accident when I heard Lloyd on the phone. He was arranging for some restaurant to deliver a special cake. It's a surprise for my wife, he explained. I decided to give my sister-in-law a present too. Not that we had a particularly warm relationship, but still, family is family. Maybe a small token of attention would melt the ice. For 3 days I pondered the choice. What could I get for a woman whose tastes were so different from anything I knew? In the end, I settled on a silver bracelet that had once belonged to Marjorie. Not the most expensive piece of jewelry, but dainty, with a small crescent moon pendant. I'd found a jewelry shop in town where it had been cleaned and polished. I carefully packed the bracelet in a small box, wrapped it in gift paper, even attached a bow I'd bought at the stationery store. On Janice's birthday, I came down for breakfast earlier than usual. I wanted to deliver the gift before all the fuss started, but the kitchen was already bustling with activity, with Lloyd hanging balloons and Janice arranging snacks on the table. "Happy birthday," I said, holding out the box. Janice turned around, a look of surprise on her face that quickly changed to a strained smile. "Oh, Garth, thank you. You shouldn't have bothered." She took the gift but didn't open it, just placed it on the edge of the table and continued her preparations. "There's a bracelet," I said, feeling the need to explain. It was Marjorie's. Not very expensive, but good quality silver. I thought, "How nice," Janice interrupted, not even looking at the box. "Lloyd, have you seen my cell phone? Emma needs to call about tonight." Lloyd shrugged and then looked at me with a strange expression, either apologetic or annoyed. "Dad, we're having guests tonight," he said. "Lots of guests. Janice wants to have a real party." "I understand," I nodded. "What can I do to help?" There was that exchange of glances between them again. I'd already learned to recognize this silent conversation. "Actually," Janice began, "we were thinking, you see, Garth, my friends, Lloyd's co-workers are coming. It's going to be loud, a lot of young people. You might not be comfortable." "I don't mind the noise," I said. "After all, a birthday is once a year." "It's not just the noise," Lloyd interjected. "Dad, you don't really like big groups, and the conversations will be, well, not your style. We thought maybe it would be more convenient for you to dine separately. We'll cook, bring it to your room." I felt something tighten inside me. They didn't want me at the party. In my own home, they asked me to hide, to disappear, not to interfere with their presence. "I understand," I said after a pause. "Of course I won't interfere with your fun." "Thank you, Dad," Lloyd exhaled with relief. "I knew you'd understand." I spent the rest of the day in my room, listening to the music, voices, and dishes downstairs. Around 7 o'clock, Lloyd knocked on the door and brought a tray of food, a slice of some exotic pie, a salad, and a glass of wine. "Help yourself, Dad," he said. "It's delicious Thai food." I thanked him and asked how the party was going. "Great," Lloyd smiled. "Janice is thrilled with my present. I bought her a new smartphone, the latest model. You should have seen her face." "And the bracelet?" I asked. "Did she like the bracelet?" Lloyd hesitated. "Of course she did, Dad. It was a very nice gift. It's just that, she already has a lot of jewelry and she doesn't really wear silver. But she appreciated the thought, really." I nodded. What else could I do? Around 9 o'clock, I heard the front door slam. When I looked out the window, I saw the whole company, 15 people, getting into their cars. "We'll continue at the Blue Whale," shouted someone. "First round for the birthday girl." They drove off to celebrate further. Without me, of course. I wasn't looking for a nightclub or a bar, but it still left a residue. I went downstairs. The kitchen and living room were a battlefield, dirty plates, empty bottles, and uneaten appetizers everywhere. There were burst balloons on the floor, a mountain of unwashed dishes piled up in the sink. I wonder who's going to clean all this up, I thought. The question was rhetorical. Me, of course. Who else would? I started in the living room, picking up trash in a large plastic bag. Among the gift wrappers, I noticed a familiar package, the same one Marjorie's bracelet had been wrapped in. The box was lying nearby, open and empty. The bracelet itself was nowhere to be seen. In the corner of the couch, I noticed a silver object of some kind. I bent down and picked it up, and my heart clenched. It was Marjorie's bracelet, tossed among the scraps and napkins like an unwanted trinket. I stood looking at the little silver piece for a long time, for the first time allowing myself to admit the obvious. My sister-in-law not only did not share my tastes, she despised everything connected with me and my past. 3 days later, something happened that finally opened my eyes to my position in this house. Lloyd and Janice invited their friends, a married couple named Talbot, over for dinner. I was surprised when they suggested I join them. "You should meet Brian and Vivian," Lloyd said. "They are terrific people. Brian works at the same company as me, only in the strategic planning department, and Vivian is a lawyer. They recently bought a house in Sutton Coldfield, which is an incredible place," I agreed, although I didn't understand my son's sudden desire to include me in his social circle. Maybe he wanted to make up for the awkwardness of Janice's birthday. Or maybe he just decided it was time to show some respect for his father. Either way, I was glad for the opportunity to finally feel like part of the family, rather than a ghost living on the top floor. That evening I put on my best suit, the same one I had worn when I married Marjorie, then buried her, and in between for the most important meetings and holidays. It didn't fit as well as it used to. I had lost weight in recent years, but it still looked decent. When I went down to the living room, I found Lloyd and Janice dressed up too. Janice was wearing some elaborate dress with an unusual neckline, and Lloyd was wearing a new suit I didn't even know I'd bought. I sat back in my chair, watching Janice check the table setting one last time. She had arranged the candles, laid out the napkins, even pulled out an old china set from the sideboard, the same one Marjorie and I had gotten as a wedding present and kept for special occasions. The Talbots entered the living room, a tall man with a neat beard and a slender woman with a short haircut. Both were in their 40s, well-dressed, with the confident movements of people accustomed to success. "And this is my father, Garth," Lloyd introduced me. I stood up, extending my hand. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Welcome." "Pleased to meet you," Brian Talbot replied, shaking my hand. His handshake was firm but mechanical. "Lloyd's told me a lot about you." "Really?" I wondered. My son rarely talked about me, even to me. "Of course," Vivian smiled. "He's very caring about you." Something in her tone made me wary. It wasn't the usual social phrase. There was something else in it, some hidden meaning that was clear to everyone but me. The conversation flowed easily and casually, but not to me. Brian and Lloyd were discussing some work projects, using terms I didn't understand. Janice and Vivian talked about the Talbots' recent trip to Italy, comparing the restaurants of Florence to the boutiques of Milan. I remained silent, occasionally nodding and smiling when someone threw a glance in my direction. I tried to get a word in, edgewise, a couple times, asking Brian about his work, asking Vivian how long she'd been practicing law. But each time, my questions were met with a short answer, and then the conversation went back to the way it had been before, excluding me. "And you, Garth, what did you do before you retired?" Vivian suddenly asked, apparently out of politeness. "I was a mechanic at the Mason plant," I answered. 35 years at that place. I started out as a laborer and ended up as a foreman." "Oh, that's interesting," Vivian said with that peculiar intonation that betrays a complete lack of interest. "The factory closed, of course," I continued, "about 10 years ago. They moved all the production to somewhere in Asia. But at one time it was a landmark for Birmingham. We used to make—" "Dad likes to talk about the old days," Lloyd interrupted me. "But I'm afraid not many people are interested now. Brian, were you talking about the new project with the German partners?" And the conversation passed me by again. I sat mechanically munching on some complicated dish Janice had prepared and felt invisible. It was as if I were not sitting at the same table with them, but watching through a glass, transparent only on my side. At one point I caught Vivian's gaze, a strange, evaluating one. She was looking at me with her head tilted slightly, as if trying to solve some riddle. "Garth, where did you live before you moved in with Lloyd and Janice?" she asked. I blinked in surprise. "I didn't move anywhere. This is my home. I've lived here for almost 50 years. It was Lloyd and Janice who moved in after Marjorie, my wife, died." There was an awkward pause. Vivian looked at Lloyd, who was blushing slightly. "Oh yes, of course," Vivian said quickly. "I misunderstood. So this is your house. How nice of you to share it with your son and his wife." Janice intervened, clearly trying to change the subject. "Speaking of houses, Vivian, tell me more about your new living room. You said you found some amazing designer." Once again, I was excluded from the conversation. But now I realized that Lloyd was presenting the situation to his friends in a very different way. He didn't move in with me, I moved in with him. He wasn't living in my house, I was living in his. I'd been turned from a master to a squatter, even in the eyes of strangers. Dinner dragged on endlessly. I became more and more withdrawn, giving one-word answers when I was asked anything. No one seemed to notice my mood or didn't care. Finally, when dessert was served, some complicated cake with a French name, I apologized and got up from the table. "I'm tired," I said. "I think I'll go to my room. It was nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Talbot." "You too," Brian nodded. "Feel better." "Feel better?" I didn't say I was sick. Apparently that, too, was part of the legend Lloyd had created, an old, sick father cared for by a kind son. I went up to my room and sat on my bed, listening to the voices and laughter coming from downstairs. They were clearly enjoying the evening. They were more comfortable without me. As time passed, I heard the guests saying goodbye, the front door slamming. Then the sounds of cleaning up in the kitchen, the muffled voices of Lloyd and Janice. I hadn't planned on eavesdropping. I just stepped out into the hallway to go downstairs for a glass of water, my throat dry from the wine I'd drunk and the words I hadn't said. But at the stairs, I froze when I heard my name. "I don't know why we had to invite your father," Janice said. "Did you see the way Vivian looked at him? She's a lawyer, specializes in family law. She's probably already mentally drafting the custody papers." "Come on," Lloyd said. "Nobody suspected a thing. I explained that he sometimes forgets things, age and all that." "But he said it was his house," Janice objected. "And you assured Brian that we took him in out of pity because he couldn't live alone." "Technically, it is his home," Lloyd sighed. "For now. But I've explained our plan to you. With a little more time, we'll convince him that he needs special care. Sunny Hills is a great place, I've heard of it. They even take people who are still relatively independent but need supervision." "He'd never do that," Janice snorted. "You know your father, he's stubborn as a donkey. He'll cling to this house to the last man." "Don't worry," Lloyd's voice got quieter, and I had to listen harder. "I've already consulted a lawyer. If we can prove that he's incapable of making rational decisions, the court will appoint me his guardian, and then I can dispose of his assets, including the house." "And how would we prove that?" Janice asked skeptically. "He's old and unbearable sometimes, but he's got a good head." "We'll find a way," Lloyd said confidently. "Maybe we'll get a doctor. There are specialists who can write a report for a certain amount of money. Or we'll record his oddities, the way he sometimes talks to himself or forgets where he's put things." After that conversation overheard by the stairs, I couldn't look at Lloyd and Janice as I had before. Every word they said, every gesture, seemed fake to me now, filled with hidden meaning. I began to notice things I'd previously preferred to ignore, the way they shut up when I entered the room, the meaningful looks they exchanged if I forgot where I'd put my glasses or confused the days of the week, the way Lloyd wrote something down on his phone after such moments. They were putting together a dossier on me, a dossier that would convince the court that I was incompetent. I became more cautious, stopped talking to Marjorie's picture even when I was alone in the room. There was little chance they might have installed some listening devices. Always double-checked where I put my things. Tried not to look absent-minded or forgetful. But strangely enough, along with that caution came something else: peace of mind. Now that I knew exactly what was going on, I no longer had to doubt my senses or blame myself for being suspicious. I was no longer flitting between the hope that things would get better and the fear that I was going to be forced out of my own home. I knew the truth, and that knowledge, as bitter as it was liberating. I started getting out of the house more often. I took walks in the park, visited the local library, popped into the Red Lion pub where I met a few regulars my age. We discussed soccer, politics, the good old days. None of them looked at me as a burden or a feeble-minded old man. To them, I was just Garth, a retired guy with a good sense of humor and a sharp mind. One day I met Norman Page, an old acquaintance with whom I had once worked at the plant. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, since Marjorie's funeral. "Garth Beckwith," he exclaimed, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's been a long time. I heard you'd gone bad." "Who did you hear that from?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "Your son told me. I met him once at the supermarket and asked him how you were doing, and he said that you hardly ever get up and your memory is very poor. I thought I'd pay a visit to an old friend, but you're so chipper." I grinned bitterly. "You see, Norman, my son exaggerates my problems, exaggerating my health problems." "I get it." Norman nodded. "Why would he do that?" I told him everything about how Lloyd and Janice had gradually taken over my house, how they'd pushed me to the margins of my own life, how now they planned to put me in a nursing home to take over my property. Norman listened, shaking his head. "That's how it is," he said when I was done. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "For now, I'm just living and waiting." "Waiting for what?" "A sign. A moment. I don't know. But I feel like something will happen soon. And then I'll know what to do." Norman looked at me doubtfully, but he didn't argue. We moved on to other topics: mutual acquaintances, the latest Birmingham news, memories of the factory. Coming home felt different. Talking to Norman had changed something. It was the first time I'd told someone about my situation out loud, put my fears and resentments into words, and that made them more real, more weighty. I could no longer pretend that everything was okay, even in front of myself. Something was going to happen, and very soon. The catalyst was a conversation about renovations. The house was old, and although I'd kept it in good condition, some things needed updating. The roof was starting to leak in one spot, the pipes in the bathroom were clogging periodically, and the wiring in the kitchen couldn't take the strain of all the new appliances Lloyd and Janice had brought in. I was sitting at the kitchen table that morning when they came downstairs, talking animatedly about some plans. "And we could take that wall down," Janice said, pointing to the partition between the kitchen and the living room. "It would make a great open space, like the houses we'd seen in the magazine." "And change all the windows," Lloyd said. "Those old wooden frames are terribly inefficient for insulation." I listened to them without interfering. They talked about my house as if they already owned it. They were planning a remodeling project, not interested in my opinion. "Good morning," I said at last. They turned around, clearly surprised by my presence. "Oh, Dad, you're up already," Lloyd said. "We didn't see you." "I've been here for an hour," I replied calmly. "I had breakfast." "Ah," Janice smiled awkwardly. "We were just, talking about something." "I heard," I nodded. "You want to do some renovations." They looked at each other. Lloyd cleared his throat. "Yeah, we were thinking. You see, Dad, the house needs updating. The roof leaks, the pipes are old, the wiring's a mess. Plus, to be honest, the design is a little, outdated. Janice and I would like to make it more modern. And who's going to pay for these renovations? I asked. There was that exchange of looks again. Well, mostly you, Lloyd said. It's your house. But we'll do our part too when the financial situation improves. When things get better, I said again. In the meantime, I'm supposed to spend my savings on repairs I don't need in a house that doesn't respect me? There was a tense silence. What do you mean? Lloyd frowned. I mean, I said, trying to be calm, that you're planning to remodel my house to your liking, with my money without even asking my opinion. Dad, we were just discussing, Lloyd began. Of course we would have asked you. Would we? I looked him straight in the eye. When would you have asked? Before or after consulting with the designer? Before or after ordering materials? Before or after they'd started tearing down the walls? Don't be so dramatic, Garth, Janice interjected. We're a family. We live in this house together, and if we want to make it more comfortable and modern, what's wrong with that? What's wrong is that you don't ask me. It's bad enough that you decide for me. It's bad enough that you treat me like an invisible man in my own house. Dad, calm down. Lloyd put his hands out in a conciliatory gesture. No one thinks you're invisible. It's just, well, you don't know much about current interior design trends, do you? Janice and I want to create a space we can live in comfortably for years to come. You? I interjected. What about me? Well, you don't have long to live, Janice said, and then covered her mouth with her hand, clearly realizing she'd said the wrong thing. There was a long pause. What do you mean? I asked, feeling something cold inside. What she means, Lloyd interjected quickly, is that at your age, maybe you shouldn't worry so much about the color of the walls or the type of flooring. There are more important things, aren't there? Like what? I wasn't going to make it easy for them. Like your health, Lloyd said, your comfort. We just want you to be able to spend your remaining years without worrying about a leaky roof or clogged pipes. The remaining years, I repeated slowly. You mean you've already calculated how long I have left? Dad, no one has calculated anything. Lloyd was starting to lose patience. We're just being realistic. You're 78. The average life expectancy for men in the UK is 81 years. The math is simple. You're talking about my death as a business transaction, I said, like an investment that will soon pay off. No one is talking about your death. Lloyd raised his voice. We're talking about renovations. We're talking about making this house more comfortable for all of us. For you, I corrected. Not for all of us. For you. Okay, for us. Lloyd shook his hands. Because we're going to be living here long after you've... He hesitated, but it was too late. After I'm dead, I finished for him. Is that what you meant to say? Jesus, Dad. Lloyd ran his hand over his face. You're insufferable. We're just trying to do what's best. What's best for who? I asked. For me? Or for you? What's the difference? Janice intervened. We're family. What's good for us is good for you. No, Janice. I shook my head. We're not a family. At least not in the way you mean it. Family is about respect. Family is caring. Family is not what you've been doing to me for the past 5 years. What are we doing? Janice crossed her arms over her chest. Enlighten us, Garth. You're taking advantage of me, I said simply. My house, my money, my kindness. And in return, you treat me like a nuisance, a burden to be endured until I die or go to sunny hills. They froze. Lloyd's face reflected shock, then anger. Were you eavesdropping? He asked. Eavesdropping on our conversations? I overheard, I answered. But that doesn't change the point. You were planning to send me to a nursing home to take possession of my house. We were planning to give you proper care, Lloyd exclaimed. Because you're getting old, Dad. Because you need help that we can't provide. Help? I grinned bitterly. What kind of help? I'm completely self-sufficient. I cook, I clean, I do laundry, I go shopping. I even clean up after your parties, for crying out loud." "You're talking to yourself," Lloyd said. "You forget where you put things. Sometimes you get confused about the days of the week." "Does that make me incapacitated?" I asked. "Does that give you the right to take away the house I bought and paid off myself for 30 years? "No one's talking about taking away your house," Lloyd tried to ease the tension. "We just want you to be taken care of by professionals." "While you enjoy my house and my money," I added. "Dad, you've got it all wrong," Lloyd shook his head. "We care about you. We want the best for you." "No, Lloyd," I said calmly. "You only care about yourself. You always have." "It's not fair," he exclaimed. "I've always been a good son. I got an education, got a stable job, started a family, just like you and Mom wanted." "Your mom and I wanted you to be happy," I replied, "and for you to be a good person. But you chose a different path." "What other way?" Lloyd rolled his eyes. "You sound like a character in a cheap drama." "The way of the lie," I said. "You lied to your friends that this was your house, not mine. You lied that I live with you, not you with me. You spread rumors of my incapacity to pave the way for my disenfranchisement." "Come on, Dad," Janice interjected. "Lloyd was just a little embellished the situation. We all exaggerate sometimes." "Exaggerated?" I looked her in the eye. "He was telling people that I was sick, that I couldn't get out of bed, that I'm not in my right mind. That's not embellishing, Janice. That's a lie." "Stop it!" Lloyd slammed his palm on the table. "Stop accusing us of every mortal sin. We sheltered you when you were alone. We put up with your senile quirks, your grumbling, your outdated outlook on life. And instead of thanking us, you're throwing a tantrum over some repair." I was silent, looking at my son. He was breathing hard, his face red with anger. Janice stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, either comforting or supporting him. "You still don't get it," I said finally. "This is my house, Lloyd. It's mine, not yours. I never asked you to house me. I let you live here when you lost your apartment, out of pity, out of love for you, though now I doubt you deserve it." "For God's sake, Papa," Lloyd exclaimed, "who needs this house but Janice and me? You? What are you going to do with 3 bedrooms, with a garden you can't cultivate, with a roof that leaks and pipes that need replacing? You're nothing without us. Do you understand? No one." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Nobody. My only son called me nothing. A strange calmness came over me. It was as if I'd been waiting all my life for this moment, the moment when the masks would finally fall away and I would see the truth in all its ugly nakedness. I slowly got up from the table. I went to the hook by the door where the keys hung, several bundles of them, keys to the front door, to the back door, to the garage, to the garden shed. I collected them all. "What are you doing?" Lloyd asked, watching me with bewilderment. "Something I should have done a long time ago," I replied, tucking the keys into my pocket. "Dad, give the keys back," Lloyd said with a nervous chuckle. "This is stupid." "No, Lloyd," I shook my head. "It was stupid to let you treat me the way you've been treating me for the last 5 years. It was stupid to turn a blind eye to your lies and manipulations. It was stupid to hope that you would ever be the family I deserve." "What are you talking about?" Janice shifted her gaze from me to Lloyd and back again. "I'm talking about you having to find a new place to live," I said calmly. "You have 2 weeks to pack up and move out." They stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. "You're kidding," Lloyd said at last. "This is some kind of ridiculous joke." "No, Lloyd, it's not a joke. This is my house. It's my property, and I don't want you living here anymore." "You can't just kick us out," Janice exclaimed. "We have rights." "No, Janice, you don't have rights," I replied. "You don't pay rent. We don't have a contract. You live here solely on my goodwill, and that's over." "Dad, listen." Lloyd changed tactics, his voice softer. I overreacted. I said something I shouldn't have said. Let's just forget this conversation, okay? Let's just get back to business as usual. What business, Lloyd? I asked. The one where you make plans to send me to a nursing home? The one where you tell everyone I'm incapacitated? The ones where you spend my money, use my house, and yet you think I'm a burden? We never thought of you as a burden, Lloyd began. But I interrupted him. You just called me a nobody, Lloyd. Nobody. My own father. That's not what I meant. He looked almost afraid. I just, overreacted. No, Lloyd. I shook my head. You said exactly what you think you said. And you know what? I thank you for that. Because now I know exactly what to do. I headed out of the kitchen. Where are you going? Lloyd shouted after me. To the lawyer's office, I answered without turning around. To draw up the papers for your eviction. And then to the bank to change my passwords and restrict access to my accounts. You can't do that. Janice's voice sounded almost hysterical. We're your family. I stopped in the doorway and turned around. No, Janice, I said calmly. You're not my family. You're just people who took advantage of my kindness. And now it's over. We're going to sue you, shouted Lloyd. We'll prove that you're incompetent. Try it, I said. I have witnesses who will testify that you spread false information about my health. I have Norman Page, whom you told that I can hardly stand up. There's my doctor who will confirm that I'm perfectly healthy for my age. And there's CCTV footage of me in the Red Lion pub playing darts and beating people half my age. That last was a small lie. I wasn't sure there were cameras in the pub, and I certainly wasn't playing darts. But judging by the look on Lloyd's face, the bluff had worked. You wouldn't dare, he said, but there was no confidence in his voice. I would, I said, because I'm not a nobody, Lloyd. I'm your father. I'm the man who gave you life, raised you, paid for your education. I'm the man who let you into his home when you needed help. And I'm the man who will no longer allow himself to be treated like a doormat to wipe his feet on. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them standing there with their mouths hanging open. I went up to my room, took an old briefcase out of the closet, and started gathering documents I might need. The certificate of title to the house, bank statements, medical reports from the last checkup. I proceeded methodically, calmly, with a clear head. Strangely, I felt no anger or resentment, only determination. Determination to finally take my life into my own hands. Gathering everything I needed, I left the room and headed for the stairs. Halfway up, Lloyd caught up with me. Dad, wait, he said, grabbing my hand. Let's talk. Let's settle this like adults. I pulled my hand free. It's too late, Lloyd. You made your own choice. I was angry, he exclaimed. People say stupid things when they're angry. No, Lloyd, I shook my head. When people are angry, they tell the truth that they usually hide behind polite smiles and empty phrases. I walked down the stairs and through the living room, where Janice sat on the couch with her hands covering her face. At the front door, I stopped, looked back at the house, my house, which would soon be truly mine again, and stepped out to face my new life, a life in which I would no longer be a nobody. The case was not as simple as I had imagined. Kicking your own son out of the house is not only an emotionally difficult process, it's also legally complex. A young lawyer, Percy Wilmot, whom I'd found on Norman's recommendation, explained the intricacies. Mr. Beckwith, they have no legal right to your home, he said as he looked over the documents I'd brought. But since they've been living there for more than 2 years, the eviction process has to be done properly. We'll have to serve a formal notice and give them a reasonable period of time to find a new place to live. How long will that take? I asked. At least a month, Percy replied. Maybe longer if they resisted. And they were resisting. They did. When I got home from my meeting with the lawyer, Lloyd and Janice were sitting in the kitchen as if nothing had happened. Lloyd was typing on his laptop. Janice was flipping through a magazine. They looked up at me and smiled, fake, strained smiles, but smiles nonetheless. "Dad, we ordered pizza for dinner," Lloyd said. "Your favorite, pepperoni." I silently walked to the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of water, and headed for the stairs. "Garth, why don't we talk?" Janice called out to me. We'd all gotten a little overexcited this morning. I stopped. "We have nothing to talk about," I said. "You'll get an official eviction notice within a week. You'll have 30 days to find a new place to live." "Dad, that's ridiculous." Lloyd put the laptop aside. "You're not seriously thinking of throwing us out on the street, are you?" "Not out on the street," I replied. "You have jobs, savings. You'll find an apartment." "But why?" Lloyd threw up his hands. "It's a big house, plenty of room for everyone. We just didn't get along. It happens in every family." "You were planning to put me in a nursing home," I reminded him, "to take over my estate. It's not a little falling out, Lloyd. That's betrayal." "We would never do that," Janice exclaimed. "It's just, talking. People sometimes say things they don't really mean." "I've heard enough," I replied, "and I've made my decision. This is my house, and I don't want you in it anymore." I went up to my room, closed the door, and sat down on the bed. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from tension. I expected screams, threats, maybe even tears, but not this ostentatious calm, not this attempt to pretend that nothing serious had happened. That was just their first tactic. Others followed. The next day, returning from the park, I found Janice in the living room surrounded by photo albums. "Oh, Garth," she said, as if surprised to see me in my own home. "I've been going through some old pictures. Look how cute Lloyd was when he was a kid." She handed me a picture of 6-year-old Lloyd sitting on my lap with a book. We were both smiling at the camera, carefree, genuine. "You were so happy," Janice continued. "Such a tight-knit family. Marjorie must have been proud of you both." I didn't take the photograph. "Don't use my wife's memory to manipulate me," I said calmly. "What?" Janice acted surprised. "I was just looking through the albums. I thought maybe you'd like to reminisce about the old days." "You never cared about the old days," I replied. "You threw away Marjorie's things, rearranged her pictures, threw away her favorite vase. And now all of a sudden you're interested in family pictures? Don't take me for a fool, Janice." I went upstairs to my room, ignoring her protests. That evening, Lloyd came in, knocked on the door of my room, the first time he'd been so polite in a long time. "Daddy, may I come in?" I said yes. He sat on the edge of the bed, clasping his hands together nervously. "Listen," he began, "I understand that you're upset. And you have your reasons. Janice and we really haven't treated you with the respect you deserve, and I apologize for that." I stayed silent, waiting for it to continue. "But kicking us out isn't the answer," he continued. "Think about it. What are you going to do alone in this big house? Who will help you with household chores? What if you get sick? What if you fall down and can't get up?" "I managed on my own after your mother died," I reminded myself. "I can manage now." "You were 73 then," Lloyd countered. "You're 78 now. That's a big difference, Dad." "I'm in perfect health," I said. "My doctor will confirm it." "Today, yes," Lloyd nodded. "What about a year from now? 2 years from now?" "Think about the future, Dad. About your safety, your comfort." "That's what I'm thinking about," I answered. "My safety and my comfort. And I've come to the conclusion that I feel neither with you." Lloyd sighed. "Okay," he said after a pause. "I understand your feelings, but maybe we could reevaluate our relationship, set some new rules, clearly define the boundaries." "It's too late," I shook my head. "I gave you 5 years to show me that you respect me and my home. You failed that test." "Dad, people make mistakes." Lloyd looked at me pleadingly. "We can change. We can be better." "You can," I agreed, "but not here, not on my dime." He left, muttering something about my cruelty and senile stubbornness. The next day, The tactics changed again. Now they decided to bring in the big guns. The first to arrive was Lloyd's sister, my niece Judith. She lived in Manchester and came rarely, usually for Christmas or other important family events. Her sudden visit on an ordinary Tuesday was clearly no accident. "Uncle Garth, what's going on?" she asked as soon as we were alone. "Lloyd says you're kicking them out of the house." "I am," I confirmed. "But why?" She sounded genuinely puzzled. "They take care of you, helping with the house, cooking, cleaning." I looked at her carefully. "Who told you that? Lloyd?" "Yeah," she nodded. "Why?" "Judith, when was the last time you were here?" "At Christmas," she answered. 3 months ago." "And how did the house look to you? Who cooked the holiday dinner?" she wondered. "I think it was you." "Yeah, that's right, you cooked the turkey. And the pudding." "And who cleaned up after the party?" "Well, you too, I guess." She looked puzzled. "Why the questions, Uncle Garth?" "Because Lloyd lied to you," I said calmly. "They don't care about me. I take care of them. I cook, I clean, I do their laundry, and they use my house, my money, and yet they treat me like a burden." Judith looked shocked. "It can't be," she said. "Lloyd wouldn't—" "He would," I interrupted. "And he did. Ask your mom, she knows what he's like. She knows how seldom he visited me after Marjorie died, how he only showed up when he needed a place to live." Judith nodded slowly. "I'll talk to Mother," she said. "And to Lloyd, too. There's some misunderstanding, Uncle Garth. A family can't break up like this." I didn't argue. "Let her talk to Lloyd's sister, my sister-in-law Elizabeth. She'd always seen right through Lloyd, never succumbed to his manipulations." That same evening, Elizabeth called. "Garth," she said without preamble, "Judith told me about your situation. I'm on your side." "You are?" I was surprised at this directness. "Of course," she snorted. "I know my nephew. I know how he can turn a situation to his advantage. Marjorie spoiled him too much, and you just loved him, Garth. Maybe too much." "Maybe," I agreed. "But that's in the past now. I'm sure he deserved to be evicted," Elizabeth continued. "But be prepared for the fact that he wouldn't just give up. Lloyd always got what he wanted, always found a way." "Not this time," I said firmly. "I hope so," she said, doubt in her voice. "But be careful, Garth. He might try turn the situation against you." "How?" "I don't know," she sighed. "But my gut tells me he won't go quietly and peacefully." Elizabeth was right. 2 days later, when I returned from the store, I found a stranger in the living room. He was sitting on the couch next to Lloyd, discussing something in a low voice. When I arrived, they both fell silent. "Dad," Lloyd said with a strained smile, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Higgins. He's a specialist in gerontology." I knew right away what was going on. "Hello, Mr. Beckwith," Dr. Higgins said, standing up. "Your son is concerned about your health. He says you've been having episodes of disorientation, forgetfulness." "My son is lying," I interrupted. "And you, doctor, are part of that lie. I'm in perfect health, and my attending physician, Dr. Finch, will attest to that. I had a complete examination 3 months ago." "Well, sometimes the symptoms come on suddenly," Dr. Higgins began, but I interrupted him again. "Leave my house immediately or I'll call the police. You have no right to conduct any examination without my consent." Dr. Higgins looked at Lloyd confused. "I told you he could be aggressive," he said. "That's a symptom too." "Get out of my house," I repeated, pulling out my cell phone. "Both of you." Dr. Higgins hurriedly packed his bag and headed for the exit. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Beckwith," he mumbled. "I only wanted to help." "You wanted money for a fake diagnosis," I said, "and we both know it." When the door closed behind him, I turned to Lloyd. "This is your last chance," I said. "Either you leave amicably or I'm filing a police report for attempted fraud and restraint of an elderly person." "You're out of your mind," Lloyd hissed. You think anyone would believe an old man against a family man with an impeccable reputation? Shall we check it out? I picked up the phone. I have friends who will confirm that I'm sane. I have tapes of you and me talking. And there's your Dr. Higgins, who I'm sure won't want to lose his license for participating in a scam. Lloyd turned pale. You're bluffing, he said. You didn't record our conversations. I smiled and didn't answer. Let him guess. Let him be nervous. After that incident, the tactics changed again. Now they tried to ignore me, passing by as if they didn't notice, talking among themselves across the room I was in as if I wasn't there. I didn't mind. I was more comfortable without their fake smiles and feigned concern. And then there were new well-wishers. One morning the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Parker, the neighbor with whom Marjorie and I had always maintained a polite but cool relationship. Garth, dear, she said, as if we were best friends. May I come in? I brought blueberry pie. I couldn't say no to an old woman with pie, even though I suspected the visit was not casual. You know, I'm so worried about you, she began as we settled into the kitchen with tea and her pie. The neighbors say you're going to kick Lloyd and Janice out, is that true? Yes, I answered simply. But why? She splashed her hands. They're so thoughtful, always asking if I need help with heavy bags, telling me how you're feeling. They tell you about me? I raised an eyebrow. And what do they say? Well, Mrs. Parker looked a little embarrassed, that you forget things sometimes. You get confused, that they have to make sure you take your medication. What kind of medication? I asked. Yeah, I don't know exactly, she was confused. Some kind of memory pills, I think. Mrs. Parker, I said calmly. I don't take any memory pills. I don't have a memory problem. Lloyd and Janice lied to you, like so many others. But why would they do that? She seemed genuinely surprised. To get my house, I answered. They wanted to send me to a nursing home and stay here. I overheard them talking by accident. Mrs. Parker looked at me doubtfully. Garth, dear, maybe you misunderstood. Sometimes at our age, our hearing fails us. My hearing is fine, I said. And I know exactly what I heard. They were planning to get rid of me, and I'm not going to let that happen. After Mrs. Parker left, I felt devastated. It was bittersweet to realize that neighbors who had known me for decades had so easily believed false stories about my health. How far had Lloyd gone in his campaign to discredit his own father? I decided to find out. The next day I went to my favorite pub, the Red Lion. There were always old acquaintances there, people with whom I sometimes had a word or two about the weather or soccer. The first person I met was Bernard, a retired letter carrier who had been delivering letters in our neighborhood for 30 years. He was sitting at his usual table by the window. Hi, Garth, he nodded. How's your health? Fine, I said, taking a seat next to him. How are you? Nothing. I'm hanging in there. Bernard sipped his beer. I hear you're having problems with your son. Heard from whom? I asked warily. He came by here the other day, Bernard said. He asked if I'd noticed anything strange in your behavior lately. Said he was worried about your sanity. I went cold. What did you say to him? I told him to go to hell, of course, Bernard snorted. I've known you for 30 years, Garth. If anyone has mental problems, it's your son. I felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you, Bernard. You're welcome, he shrugged. By the way, I wasn't the only one he asked those questions to. He'd been all over the pub, all the regulars, but no one would play along. We all know you're fine. It was unexpected. I thought I was alone against Lloyd and Janice, that everyone believed their false stories. But it turns out there are people who see the truth. Bernard, I said after a pause, may I ask you a favor? Of course, old boy, he nodded. What is it? If it comes to trial, will you testify? Confirm that I'm sane? No problem, Bernard raised his mug. I'm not the only one. Half the pub will side with you if you have to. We don't leave our own behind. Our own. That word resonated strangely with me. Turns out I still had my own. People who knew me, respected me, were there for me. Not family, but something just as important. I returned home in high spirits. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in my struggle. Lloyd and Janice noticed the change. Now they looked at me warily, as if they didn't understand where this new confidence had come from. And then came the official eviction notice, a document my lawyer had sent by registered mail. 30 days to vacate the premises. No postponements, no exceptions. Lloyd burst into my room waving the paper. "Is this your last word?" he asked. "Yes," I answered calmly. "My last word." "You're going to regret it," he said. "When you're alone, when you can't handle the house, when you need help, who will be there for you? I'm not coming back, no matter what happens." "I'm not asking you to go back," I replied. "You made your choice, Lloyd. I made mine." He left, slamming the door. Janice didn't say a word to me, just stared hatefully as I walked past. The following weeks were strange. We lived in the same house, but as if we were in parallel realities. They ignored me, I ignored them. Sometimes I heard them talking on the phone, apparently looking for a new place to live. Sometimes I noticed them packing things into boxes. I started planning my new life, a life without them. The first thing I decided to do was to update the kitchen, not a major renovation like Lloyd and Janice were talking about, but simply replacing outdated appliances. Then maybe I'll do the garden, plant the new roses Marjorie loved so much. I'll fix the squeaky step on the stairs, repaint the living room walls. I made lists, made notes, called handymen, acting, planning, living. A week before the notice deadline, Lloyd made one last attempt. "Dad," he said, catching me in the hallway, "we found an apartment. It's not as nice as this one, but it's livable. We're moving in this weekend." "I'm glad," I replied. "I hope you'll be happy there." "Happy?" He grinned bitterly. "In a cramped one-bedroom apartment in the suburbs, after living in this beautiful house?" "You didn't live here, Lloyd," I said. "You use this house. There's a difference." He looked at me with an incomprehensible expression, a mixture of anger, resentment, and maybe a dash of remorse. "You know," he said finally, "I always thought this house would be mine someday, that it was the natural course of things. Parents grow old, children inherit." "Maybe it would," I replied, "if you treated me like a father instead of an obstacle to inheritance." He lowered his eyes. "I loved you, Papa, in my own way." "In your own way," I repeated. "Too bad your way of loving me included lies, manipulation, and plans to send me to a nursing home." Lloyd didn't answer, just turned around and walked away. Saturday they moved in. The truck arrived early in the morning. Lloyd and Janice carried out boxes, furniture, suitcases. I sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and looking out the window, not offering to help. When everything was loaded, Lloyd came in to say goodbye. Janice stayed in the car. "That's it," he said. "We're leaving." "Good luck in your new place," I replied. "Aren't you curious about where we're going to live?" he asked with a challenge. "Or how you'll get in touch with us in case of anything?" "No," I said honestly. "Not interested." He nodded as if he'd expected that answer. "Well, goodbye, Dad. I hope you don't regret your decision." "I won't," I said confidently. He left. I heard the front door slam, the car engine start, the tires rustle on the gravel, and then there was silence. A real silence, not the tense silence that had hung in the house for the past weeks, but a calm, peaceful silence. The silence of freedom. I stood up and slowly walked around the house. The rooms where Lloyd and Janice had lived bore traces of their presence, the faded stains on the wallpaper where their paintings had hung, the scratches on the floor from moving furniture, the forgotten book in the corner. But it was my home again, only mine. I never realized that loneliness could be so liberating. For the first few days after Lloyd and Janice left, I just enjoyed the silence. Eating breakfast in the kitchen as much as I wanted without fear of someone rolling their eyes or hinting that I was taking up too much space. Watched my favorite shows in the living room at full volume. Arranged things the way I liked them without fear that the next day they would end up hidden in a closet or thrown away for lack of use. Returned the photos with Marjorie to the mantelpiece. Took out of the garage boxes of things Janice had deemed old-fashioned and inappropriate. Among them was the Cornwall vase, miraculously surviving, wrapped in old newspapers. I put it back in its original place in the hallway, and every time I passed it, I felt as if a part of Marjorie had returned to the house. Some things had changed irrevocably. The rooms where Lloyd and Janice had lived bore the marks of their presence. Nail holes in the walls, stains in the carpet, scratches on the door jambs. But I was in no hurry to renovate. I needed to get the more important things in order first. I started with the roof. I hired a roofer to fix a leak and replace some old shingles. Then I tackled the pipes in the bathroom. Jeffrey's elderly plumber quickly identified the problem and installed new ones. Then it was the turn of the electrical wiring in the kitchen. It was completely upgraded, making it safe for all the appliances I was planning to purchase. "Great job, Mr. Beckwith," said the electrician as he gathered up his tools. "Now your house will last another half-century, no less." "I hope so," I joked. He laughed, but then looked at me more closely. "You're in good shape for your age. A lot of people look worse at 60. That was good to hear, especially after all the stories Lloyd and Janice had been spreading about my disability." A month passed, a second, a third. Life slowly took on a new rhythm. I learned to use a modern washing machine, bought a multi-cooker, and learned to use a tablet that I had bought on the advice of a clerk at an electronics store. Now I could read the news, watch videos, even order food with delivery without leaving home. But home wasn't the whole of life. I needed something else, some new interest, new people. After all, I could afford to live, not just exist. In the local paper, I came across an ad for Golden Age Club meetings at a nearby community center. For active retirees, the ad said, talks, games, tours, tea parties, every Tuesday and Thursday from 2 to 5. I decided to give it a try. After all, what was I risking? At worst, I'd spend a couple hours in the company of bored old people and never come again. The community center was housed in a converted old library, a beautiful red brick building with tall, arched windows. It was bright and spacious inside. There were round tables in a large hall where people sat, men and women about my age. Someone was playing cards, someone was playing chess. In the corner, a group of women were doing needlework, and at the table by the window, men were hotly discussing something. "Welcome." An energetic woman in her 60s with bright red hair approached me. "I'm Audrey, the club's coordinator. Is this your first time here?" "Yes," I answered. "My name is Garth Beckwith. I saw the ad in the paper and thought I'd stop by." "Oh, that's great." Audrey brightened up. "New faces are always welcome. What are you interested in, Garth? We have special interest groups, crafts, board games, a book club, even computer courses for beginners." "Honestly, I don't know," I shrugged. "I've only recently freed from family obligations. I'm looking for something new." Audrey nodded understandingly. "A lot of people come to us after losing loved ones or going through some kind of life change. Take your time, look around. Maybe something will catch your eye." I walked through the hall, feeling a little awkward. A few people looked up and nodded at me, but no one seemed particularly interested, and that was a good thing. No pressure, no questioning. I stopped at a table where men were arguing about something. "A totally irresponsible decision," said a gray-haired gentleman with a cane. "Raising taxes on small businesses at a time like this." "What do you suggest?" objected his interlocutor, a full man in a plaid shirt. The budget won't fill itself. Someone has to pay. But not at the expense of those who create jobs, insisted the first one. Tell me, he suddenly turned to me, what do you think? I was confused for a moment, but then I decided, why not? I think the tax system needs reform, I said, but not in the direction of increasing the burden on small business, but in the direction of closing loopholes for large corporations. I worked at the Mason plant for 35 years, and I've seen big companies avoid taxes while regular people pay every penny. The men stared at me with interest. You know your stuff, said the gray-haired gentleman. Have a seat. I'm Harold, former accountant, and this is Peter, who owned a hardware store until he retired. Thus began my acquaintance with the Golden Age Club's economics group, 5 retirees who met every Tuesday to discuss economic and political news. They proved to be surprisingly well-informed and passionate in their debates. From that day forward, I became a regular participant in their meetings. I soon joined a board game group that met on Thursdays as well. It turned out that I was pretty good at backgammon and chess, skills I had learned in my youth when my colleagues and I used to spend our lunch breaks at the board. But the most unexpected discovery was a cooking group organized by Audrey. Every 2 weeks they would meet in the community center kitchen and cook something interesting. Garth, come join us, Audrey suggested after one of the economic group meetings. This Friday we're making Italian pasta and sauces. It'll be fun. I'm not much of a cook, I admitted, just the basics. All the more reason to come, she laughed. Learn something new. At our age, it's important to constantly evolve. I agreed, albeit with some hesitation. But the cooking group was a real revelation. Under the guidance of Audrey and other experienced cooks, I learned how to make carbonara pasta, lasagna, even tiramisu. It turned out that I had an aptitude for cooking, patience, attention to detail, and a willingness to follow a recipe. You've got talent, Garth, Audrey said after my lasagna had gotten top marks from the entire group. Have you ever thought about getting serious about cooking? At 78 years old? I laughed. A little late for a new career. Nonsense, she said. Age is just a number. My mother started writing children's books at 82 and published 3 before she died at 90. It's never too late to find a new passion. Those words got me thinking. Really? Why not? I had time, I had energy, I had a pension that was enough for a modest but comfortable life. Why not try something new? I started experimenting in my kitchen. I bought cookbooks, watched video recipes on my tablet, tried different techniques and ingredients. I invited new friends from the club to dinners, enjoyed their compliments, and learned from mistakes. Gradually, my life took on a new meaning. In the morning, tending to the garden or minor repairs around the house. In the afternoon, club meetings, games, discussions, cooking. In the evening, a book, TV, or a video conversation with Marjorie's sister, Elizabeth, who lived in Scotland. It was 6 months after Lloyd and Janice left. I hardly thought of them, busy with my new life. But fate had it differently. One rainy October day, I went to the supermarket to buy groceries. I planned to make my signature apple pie for tomorrow's cooking group meeting. While thinking about the recipe, I didn't immediately notice who was standing by the shelf of canned goods. Dad? I looked up and saw Lloyd. He looked tired, gaunt, a cheap jacket instead of his usual stylish coat, overgrown hair, a worried look in his eyes. Hello, Lloyd, I said calmly. I didn't expect to see you here. He smiled nervously. How are you? I'm fine, I answered. And you? I'm fine. He shrugged, but I could tell it wasn't true. I'm working, living a little. There was an awkward pause. Well, I have to go, I said, getting ready to move on. Wait, Lloyd touched my arm. Why don't we have coffee? Talk? It's been 6 months. I hesitated. On the one hand, this man had caused me so much pain. On the other hand, he's my son, my blood. And from the look of him, he wasn't doing so well. Okay, I agreed. There's a cafe on the second floor. We went up the escalator and sat at a table by the window. Lloyd ordered a simple black coffee, the cheapest on the menu. I got a tea and cake. "How's Janice?" I asked to start a conversation. "Fine," Lloyd replied. "Works in the same office. She's in a meeting right now, so I'm doing the shopping myself." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "We're renting an apartment in Edgbaston. 2 rooms, small but clean. The landlady raised the rent recently, so we're saving money." I nodded, neither sympathizing nor gloating. "How about you?" Lloyd asked, sipping his coffee. "Do you manage alone in a house this big?" "Quite well," I answered. "I fixed the roof, replaced the pipes and wiring, tidied up the garden. It's all good." "Yeah, you've always been, self-reliant." Lloyd looked out the window, avoiding my gaze. "Still, isn't it hard being on your own, especially in the evenings?" "No," I said honestly. "I've made some new friends. I joined a club for seniors, and we have a lot of interesting activities. I've recently mastered Italian cooking." Lloyd raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You cook Italian food? You, who's been eating steak and potatoes your whole life?" "People change," I shrugged. "I've discovered an interest in cooking. It's fascinating." "That's great," Lloyd said, but there was no enthusiasm in his voice. "So you're, happy?" "Yes," I answered simply. "I'm happy." He looked away again. He twirled the cup in his hands. "You know, Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said finally, "about how things turned out between us. Maybe I wasn't not entirely fair to you. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from Lloyd." "Maybe," I agreed. He stammered. "Janice and I were in a difficult situation. Lost our apartment, money was tight, and this big house, where you lived alone. It seemed logical that someday it would be mine anyway. I was just, rushing things." "Hurried things along," I repeated. Interesting way to describe the attempt to declare me incompetent and send me to a nursing home. Lloyd flinched. "I would never do that," he said. "It was just talk. Stupid fantasies." "You consulted a lawyer," I reminded him, "spreading rumors about my ill health. You brought in some quack doctor to falsely diagnose me. That's not just talk, Lloyd." He stared into his cup without looking up. "I was out of it," he muttered. "Got confused. Did some stupid things. But I've changed, Dad. I really have. These 6 months have taught me a lot." "Good for you," I said. "I've been thinking." Lloyd finally looked up. "Maybe we could, start over? Forget the past. You're my father. I'm your son. Shouldn't a family stick together?" I looked at him closely. Something in his tone, in his gaze, in the way he tapped his fingers nervously on the table made me suspicious. "What exactly are you suggesting, Lloyd?" "Well," he shrugged, trying to look nonchalant. "We could start with regular meetings. I'd come over, help out around the house. Maybe stay overnight sometimes if there's a lot of work to do. Janice is a great cook. She could cook for you." The picture was getting clearer. "And then?" I asked. "When will you regain your confidence?" "What do you mean, then?" Lloyd frowned. "Just be a family, like we used to be." "Like we used to be," I repeated. "You mean you'll gradually move your things in, take over the upstairs rooms, run the house like masters, and I'll be invisible within my own walls again?" "No," exclaimed Lloyd. "It'll be different, I promise. We will respect your space, your decisions. No changes without your consent." "And your apartment?" I asked. "What will happen to it?" "We'll rent it out, I guess," Lloyd said uncertainly. "Or not rent it, if you prefer. There's no point in paying for it if we're going to live with you again. With you, that's it." "At your place, not with you," was what he meant to say. "I see," I nodded. "So it's about money. You're having trouble paying your rent and you want to come back to my house to save money." "No, Dad?" Lloyd shook his head, but his eyes were telling the truth. "It's not about money. It's about family. It's about reconciliation. Lloyd, I looked him straight in the eye, don't lie to me. At least be honest right now. Your landlady raised the rent, you're having trouble making ends meet, and you thought of the big house where you can live for free. Am I right? He was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. That's what I thought, I said, finishing my tea. Lloyd, I don't hold it against you. I really don't. You're my son, and some part of me will always love you, no matter what. But I'm not going to let you back into my life just because it suits you. Dad, you don't understand, Lloyd began. This is really hard on us. Janice is getting laid off at work, and I'm having problems with my boss. We're barely making ends meet, and you're all alone in a big house. I'm not alone, I interrupted. I have friends, hobbies, plans. I'm finally living for me, Lloyd, and you know what? I like it. But we could help each other, he insisted. You wouldn't be so lonely, and we could solve our financial problems. Everybody wins. No, I shook my head. Only you win, and I'd go back to being an ATM machine and a ghost in my own house. I'm sorry, but I'm not going back to that. Lloyd's face changed. The mask of remorse and filial love fell away, revealing anger and frustration. So you're just leaving us? He said. Your only son and his wife? Leaving us in trouble when you could have helped us? I'm not abandoning you, I said calmly. You're adults. You have jobs, education, opportunities. You'll manage. And if I don't? Lloyd looked at me defiantly. What if we're on the street? Wouldn't you care? You won't end up on the street, I said. At the very least, you'll move to a smaller apartment or a different neighborhood. It's not the end of the world, Lloyd. That's easy for you to say. He grinned bitterly. Sitting in your house, enjoying life while we struggle to survive. I've been struggling to survive my whole life, I reminded him. Working in a factory for 35 years, paying the mortgage, raising you, taking care of your mother when she was sick. I've earned the right to enjoy the rest of my days. Lloyd looked at me with undisguised distaste. You've changed, he said. You've become hard, heartless. No, I shook my head. I just stopped letting others take advantage of me. Big difference. I stood up, leaving the money for the tea and cake on the table. Goodbye, Lloyd. I wish you a way out of your predicament, but that way out won't be me. You'll regret it, he said after me. When you're old and infirm, when you need help, you'll remember this conversation. I turned around. Perhaps, I said, but I'd rather ask for help from those who value me as a person, not as a source of profit. I have such people in my life now. I walked away, leaving him sitting with his coffee untouched. I felt strangely light at heart, as if I had finally closed the door to the past and could now move on without regrets. That evening, I was making apple pie for tomorrow's cooking group meeting. I rolled out the dough, sliced apples, added cinnamon and honey to a recipe I'd perfected over the past few months. Jazz music was coming from the speakers, a new hobby I owed to Harold from the economics group. The phone rang as I was putting the pie in the oven. It was Audrey. Garth, just a reminder about tomorrow, she said. And I was wondering if you'd like to do a baking class next week. Everyone loves your pies. A master class? Me? I was surprised. But I'm a student, Audrey. What kind of teacher am I? A great one, she said confidently. You have a talent not only for baking, but also for explaining. Remember when you helped Dorothy with her Charlotte? She still admires your patience. I hesitated. A baking teacher at 78? It sounded strange, but why not? After all, age is just a number. Okay, I agreed. I'll give a master class, but if it goes disastrously wrong, it'll be your fault. Audrey laughed. It's a deal. By the way, after the meeting, the group is going to celebrate Harold's birthday at the Red Lion pub. Are you coming? Sure, I answered, smiling. Hanging up the phone, I went back to the kitchen table. Thoughts of Lloyd had already receded into the background, supplanted by plans for tomorrow. ideas for the workshop and the anticipation of seeing my friends. I caught my reflection in the glass of the oven, a gray-haired man with lively eyes and a slight smile. Not a decrepit old man, not a burden, not a nobody, but a man full of life and plans. I thought of Marjorie. What would she say if she saw me now? She'd probably be proud. Not because I'd kicked my son out of the house. She wouldn't have been happy about that. But because I'd finally found the strength to move on with my life like she'd asked.